everyone. Jared here with Why Did the Nations Rage, and today I'm going to attempt to not just show you how, but I'm also going to try to explain to you how to render in Sony Vegas Pro. I'm going to explain how the process works and try to explain different techniques and what certain things mean. This is going to be a rather lengthy video, so if you're one of those people that are just like, shut up, give me the answer, I'm not going to sit here and watch this, then you might want to try to choose one of the shorter videos on YouTube to figure out how to do this. But if you actually want to learn something so that you don't have to watch YouTube videos every time you turn around because you're trying to figure out how to do something, then you might want to take the time to watch this video. All right. So as soon as you have Sony Vegas Pro opened up, you're going to go to your video files or whatever you're rendering and you're wanting to edit. You're going to choose whatever file you want, obviously. You're going to open it up, and automatically Sony Vegas Pro is going to prompt you asking, do you want to set your project video settings to match this media? And depending on your situation, will determine how you want to answer this. If you're only using one camera whenever you make videos, or if you're, recording games or whatever else, and you're only using you're only using clips from one single source, then you might want to click this box right here just to save yourself some time, and it won't ask you this every time you try to open up a video clip. I don't ever choose that though because I have multiple cameras. I do screen captures. I use different codecs with my videos and different frame rates and frame sizes and everything else. So I don't ever click that. And normally I would hit yes, but for the sake of this video, I'm going to show you how to do everything from the ground up. So I'm going to hit no right now. And I want to explain to everybody, this is a GoPro 4 video clip. It was filmed in 4K. Right here, you're going to see your project settings. So right now, because I clicked on no, you're going to see where it says 1920 by 1080. Now this is the default setting that Sony Vegas Pro will edit videos in unless you change your template. And you change your template up here. You click on this little arrow box thingy up here. It's going to open up the project properties. Right below this on the video tab, you're going to see template. Okay. You want to drop down and come down here to the bottom section, and you're going to notice where it says 4K right here. Now, all these numbers are the frame size. Okay, this is always going to be your frame size when it comes to whatever number by whatever number. It's your frame size. It's just the measurement of how many pixels are in the frame of your video. And right here you'll see 4K, okay? But notice that these numbers here might not equal the numbers that are on your specific camera. Like for instance, on this GoPro considers 4K to be 3840 by 2160, but Sony Vegas Pro considers 4K to be 4096 by 2304. So even though I want to render in 4K, I'm still going to choose the settings that match the frame size for this particular camera. The only exception, I want to say that you'll always choose 3840 by 2160 when it comes to 4K. Even YouTube considers this size 4K. This setting here for 4K at 4096 by 2304, the only time you're going to find a frame that big is if you're using like a professional, uh, like a cinema camera that they use to film movies or commercials or something like that, with the exception of like Black Magic cameras and like Red cinema cameras and things like that. You're not going to find most 4K cameras recording in a frame that size, at least up to date. You're not going to. So it's important that you choose the right frame size. I could choose this frame size and still get the video to work. It would probably render and not have any problems. But the thing is, it's going to upscale the pixels, and it's not going to be as clear or as sharp of a resolution when it's all said and done. So I want to make sure that I'm choosing the exact frame size that the camera recorded in, which is 3840 by 2160. Just remember this number and you'll be fine. So you select that. Okay. Right here you have your frame rate. And it just so happens that this GoPro did record in 23.976. This is basically how many pictures your camera is taking in every second. So you can drop down on this box here, and if you happen to know, chances are you're not going to have to go through all this if you just click yes whenever you open up the file initially, and it asks you if you want to set the project properties to match the source video. You're not going to have to worry about any of this. But in case you're having to set everything up from the ground up for some reason, you want to look at this and you want to make sure that your frame rate matches the frame rate of the original video, with the exception of if you're using multiple cameras, like I said, because you might want to make a video with different clips. Some of those clips might be filmed at 60 frames per second. Uh, some of them might be filmed at 30 frames per second, and some of them might be framed at 24 frames per second. It just depends on what you're doing. Okay, if you're only using one source to make your video, if you only used one camera, um, or if you're only using screen capture from video games or something, you're going to want to choose the speed of that source. So for instance, this is my example, and I'm using a GoPro video file. It was filmed at 23.976 frames per second, or 24p. I'm going to choose this. Okay. Now, if you head down here, you're going to find pixel format, and this is going to give you some options. Unless you're doing color grading or something like that, I would recommend keeping it in 8-bit. If you choose 32-bit floating point full range, you'll actually have more options here for your color grading. Unless you are familiar with this stuff, I would just leave it at 8-bit and just leave it alone. You don't really need to use that unless you're trying to adjust the colors in your video, which is something that should be saved for a different video than this one. All right, so right here you're going to see full resolution rendering quality, and you can hit best, but what I recommend is that you should pay attention to the quality of your computer's processor. If you have a slower computer, an outdated computer, I would probably go with good, and that way you don't overload your system while you're trying to render a video. Um, if you have a decent CPU and you're willing to take the extra time to render it in best, then go ahead and choose best. All right, you don't really want to mess with any of this stuff right here. It's probably automatically set to the best uh, setting that it can be on. And right here, you're going to see a box that says adjust source media to better match project or rendering settings. You want to go ahead and click this box if you are using clips from one single source. Otherwise, you don't want to click it. All right. And that's pretty much all for right here. You can hit this again. You can hit this if you're going to use one camera to render your videos. You can always change it in the future, but I have no need to click that. I'm not going to click that. Make sure you click apply and then hit OK. So at this point, you would edit your video, do whatever you're going to do to it, add all your clips, whatever you want to do. Notice here that everything is set up now for 4K, 3840 by 2160. All right, when you're done editing, you just come up here to the file and then drop it down, go to render as. Of course, name your video, choose the output folder that it's in. I'm sure everybody knows that. Okay, I'm just going to name mine 4K test. All right, the next thing you want to do is come down here, and a lot of people might try to tell you to render in 4K in Sony Vegas Pro, you should use the Windows Media Video selection, but I tried that and I had frame rate issues. It seemed to drop frame rates within the middle of the video while the video was playing, and I figured there had to be a better way, so this is the way that worked the best for me. So I'm actually in the main concept section, AVC slash AAC MP4 AVC section. I went down to Internet HD 1080p. All right, now you're going to go to Customize Template. First thing you're going to want to do so you can use this template in the future is name it. So I would either name it 4K or 4K for YouTube. I'm assuming that most of you are going to be using this knowledge so that you can upload to YouTube in 4K. All right, the next thing you want to do is make sure that your video is included. So this box must be checked. And you're going to go to the frame size and hit custom frame size. And remember that number that I gave you, 3840 by 2160. All right, now you're going to come down to where it says frame rate. I wouldn't really worry about this. I believe it has something to do with the frame rate itself, but I'm not really sure. I don't really mess with this. If anything, I guess you could leave it on main or put it on high. Sorry, I don't know what that is, but I don't think it's that important for this anyway. So the next thing you want to do is select your frame rate. Remember, I was saying that mine is in 23.976 frames per second. So I'm going to choose that one. Now, you want to keep this unchecked if you are using multiple sources, but you want to check it if you're only using one source for all your files. Meaning if you're using one camera, select it. If you're not using one camera, you're using multiple uh, imports from different cameras or sources, then leave it unchecked. That's what I would do. All right. The next thing you're going to want to do is come down here to the bit rate. And this is where it gets a little bit tricky. You're going to have to do a little bit of math, but it's no big deal. So in case you're wondering what the difference between constant bit rate and variable bit rate is, from what I understand, if you have a video that has a lot of movement in it, meaning that the picture is constantly changing, then you are probably going to be better off using a constant bit rate. However, if you are rendering a video that contains a lot of static shots in it, for example, if you're using a tripod throughout the entire video and the camera just doesn't move a lot, or there's not a lot of movement in the frame of the video itself, you are probably going to be better off using a variable bit rate. And like I said, the difference is the bit rate will not change in a constant bit rate and variable bit rate. It will adjust itself accordingly, meaning it will go up and down depending on how much movement or how many times the picture has to refresh itself within the video. So just keep that in mind. With a constant bit rate, you're going to have a longer rendering time and a longer uploading time. With a variable bit rate, your file is going to be smaller and it's going to render faster. So keep those things in mind. Okay. For this one, I'll do the variable bitrate just to explain a few more things about this. So from gathering this information, I've collected that the highest bitrate possible on YouTube up to this date is 45 megabits per second, and the recommended settings for 4K video on YouTube is between 35 and 45 megabits per second. So keep in mind that every megabit would be 1 million bits. So these numbers right here represent how many bits per second are in your video. Now, when we first opened up this template, it was set on 1080p up here, and we're using it for 4K, so we have to change it. These numbers here are representing numbers for 1080p video. So obviously we're going to have to bring it up quite a bit to compensate for the extra resolution within the frame. And because we are only allotted 45 megabits per second on YouTube, I would either recommend doing this manually, or you can just choose the 50 megabits per second. I'll just go ahead and put 45 megabits per second, or 45 million bits per second on there, and I'll let that be the maximum. All right, now remember I said the range was 35 to 45 for YouTube, so I'm going to have the average frame rate be, I don't know, 35 bits per second, and see how this works on YouTube and see what it looks like. Now, your results may vary according to your computer. Keep that in mind. You don't have to go down that low. You could actually just use, like I said, the constant bit rate. The only thing about the constant bit rate is that you can't manually put a number in. You have to choose something that's pre-selected. So keep that in mind as well. All right, the next thing, and this is very important, that you're going to want to make sure that you do, is right here where you see the encode mode. As far as I know, in order to render 4K video successfully, you're going to have to select CPU only. Now, I understand that most of us who use Sony Vegas Pro or render videos in general probably have invested in dedicated graphics cards, but the thing is, if you're going to use your graphics card, you need to make sure that you have codecs within your graphics card that will support 4K rendering. Not just reading, but writing as well. It has to have this on it, or this render will not work. I'm not sure what will happen if you try to use your GPU and you do not have the codecs. I'm pretty sure that Sony Vegas will just come up with an error message and you'll have to start over. But just to be safe, unless you are certain that you have these 4K codecs, you should just use your CPU only to do 4K videos. All right, so the next thing I want to show you is the audio tab. And normally you wouldn't have to mess with this. The bit rate on here, it's a good bit rate. It's standard. The only time that I would suggest you bring the bit rate up on your audio is if you have low quality audio, and or if you add a lot of effects to your audio, you want to bring the bit rate up just to adjust it. I'm not sure what the maximum audio bit rate is for YouTube. You could probably find that information if you look it up on Google or any other search engine. So I would just leave that like it is. Again, you're not going to be able to use your GPU unless you have those codecs for it. And finally, on the project tab, you can select the rendering quality overall. And like I said, depending on how good your CPU is, you might want to stay on the good setting, which is perfectly fine, perfectly acceptable. But if you have a good CPU, definitely take advantage of the best settings. And finally, we have the color space drop down menu. And this is for, like I said before, color grading, color correction, anything that you're doing to add graphics or anything like that, you might want to take a look at your color settings. But mainly it's for color grading and color correction when you're filming in a particular uh, codec or format on your camera. Like for instance, I have a Sony A7S DSLR camera and I have the ability to shoot in S-Log too. So if you recognize the mode that you're shooting in from your camera, go ahead and select it for the best rendering outcome. Okay, but mostly people will not have to mess with this kind of stuff unless you're doing color grading. So I'm just going to leave it on default. And before we finish, make sure to go back to the video tab and click Save Template. All right, so that's pretty much it, except for this one little thing right here. You may or may not have the option to check this box here. You want to make sure that the box is unchecked unless you're just doing a sample render. If you have highlighted a particular portion of your timeline and it's highlighted in yellow down here on the timeline, then you might want to make sure that unless you are doing it purposely for the sake of rendering a sample clip, you want to make sure that this box is not selected, or you will just be rendering that part of your video. And the last thing you do is just hit render and wait for it to finish. And as you can see, this is a 1 minute clip, just over 1 minute clip, and my computer is going to take 5.5 minutes to render this one portion. So just to let you know, 4K video is a thing all its own. It takes quite a bit of processing hardware power to render in 4K. So you have to be prepared for these things. And I have a Intel i7 Core 5820K processor. I have it slightly overclocked and it's still taking over 5 times the time to render a 4K video than the actual clip is long. So just to give you an idea of the massive amount of data that's in 4K video itself, that's it. And that's the end of my video. I hope you guys got something out of this or enjoyed it. I hope you're awake. I'm sorry that it was so boring, but I hope that someone learned something. That was the whole point, not just to take a few seconds to show you how to set something up, but to actually try to go in and explain some things to you of how things work in general so that you have basic knowledge and understanding of it. And I hope that I have helped you in that way. So thanks for watching, and I'll catch you guys next time. Later.